Toto Wolff did not just face a Mercedes problem after Silverstone. He faced the decision that could decide Antonelli's entire championship fight. Because Kimi Antonelli was not simply beaten on track. He was hit by a bizarre Mercedes mechanical failure, in a race where every point mattered, while Leclerc gained a huge boost and the title picture started shifting in front of everyone. That is the kind of failure that terrifies a team boss. A bad strategy can be explained. A slow stint can be fixed. A difficult setup can be changed. But a car that takes the race out of the driver's hands, that is different. Now Wolff has to choose. Does Mercedes keep chasing maximum performance, pushing the car to the edge? Or does he protect Antonelli first, even if that means sacrificing a little speed to make sure the car survives? Because a fast Mercedes that fails is not a title weapon. It is a championship risk. A bizarre Silverstone failure. A major title fight blow. Mercedes finally finding the problem. Leclerc gaining momentum. Antonelli needing proof, not promises. And Wolff now facing the question no team principal wants to answer. What is the point of giving Antonelli a fast car, if it cannot stay alive long enough to fight? Subscribe to the channel. To understand why Wolff's decision after Silverstone matters so much, you have to understand what a mechanical failure does to a championship team. It does not only damage the result. It attacks the plan. A team like Mercedes does not arrive at a Grand Prix hoping things will work. Every run, every tire choice, every setup direction, every cooling decision, every engine setting, every race simulation, every strategy model, all of it is designed to create control. Control over the car. Control over the race. Control over the title fight. But a mechanical failure breaks that control in the most brutal way. It takes all the preparation, all the analysis, all the confidence, and it reduces everything to one painful truth. The car did not deliver when the driver needed it. That is why Antonelli's Silverstone problem hit so hard. He was not simply slower than a rival. He was not only stuck in traffic. He was not just on the wrong tire at the wrong moment. According to the source, he suffered a bizarre Mercedes failure, and that failure became a major title fight blow. That phrase changes the entire meaning of the race. Because a title fight blow is not just a bad Sunday. It is damage that can echo. It can echo in the standings. It can echo in the garage. It can echo in the driver's mind. It can echo in the way rivals see you. And for a team principal like Toto Wolff, that is where the real pressure begins. Because Wolff is not only looking at the points Antonelli lost. He is looking at what the failure might create next. Doubt. And doubt is expensive in Formula One. A driver needs the car to be fast, but he also needs the car to be dependable. He needs to believe that if he does everything right, the result will still be available at the end. He needs to know that when he pushes, the car will not punish him with a problem he cannot control. That belief is what lets a driver attack properly. Without it, the race changes before it even starts. Antonelli can handle pressure. He can handle rivals. He can handle the weight of expectation. But he should not have to climb into the car wondering whether Silverstone was a one-off, or the first sign of something Mercedes has not fully mastered. That question is poison. Because when a driver is fighting near the front, the mind has to stay clean. Every bit of attention matters. The driver is managing tire temperatures, brake balance, energy deployment, gaps to rivals, pit windows, radio instructions, track limits, and changing grip. There is already too much to process. He cannot also be carrying the question, will the car survive? That is the question Wolff has to erase. Not with words. With the car. And that is why his decision after Silverstone becomes so important. Mercedes reportedly found the problem, but finding a problem is only the beginning. A team can identify a fault in the data, understand how it happened, and still face the bigger challenge of making sure it never returns under real race pressure. That is the difference between knowing and proving. Mercedes may know what failed. But Antonelli needs proof that it is gone. Proof in practice. Proof in qualifying. Proof in the race. Proof when the car is under load, when the tires are stressed, when the temperatures are high, when the team is asking for performance, and when the championship pressure is at its loudest. That is where Wolff's decision becomes a balancing act. Because the easiest emotional reaction after a failure is to protect everything. Turn the car down. Add margin. Be conservative. Make sure nothing breaks again. But Formula One does not reward fear. If Mercedes becomes too cautious, rivals will gain. Leclerc will not wait. Ferrari will not wait. Red Bull will not wait. McLaren will not wait. Every team around Mercedes will keep pushing, because a title fight does not pause while one team rebuilds confidence. So Wolff cannot simply choose safety at any cost. But he also cannot choose speed at any cost. That is the trap. Too aggressive, and the car risks another failure. Too cautious, and Antonelli loses the pace he needs to fight. The correct answer is somewhere in the narrow, uncomfortable middle. Controlled attack. That is what Mercedes needs now. Not panic. Not denial. Controlled attack. A car reliable enough to finish, but still sharp enough to fight. A team brave enough to chase performance, but disciplined enough not to ignore the warning Silverstone gave them. A setup direction that gives Antonelli confidence, without turning the Mercedes into a machine that is protected so heavily it loses its edge. That is the decision Wolff has to make. And it is harder than it sounds, because the Silverstone failure did not happen in isolation. The source frames it as bizarre, and that word matters. A bizarre failure makes people uncomfortable because it suggests the problem was not obvious before it appeared. It suggests something unexpected. Something that did not behave the way the team assumed it would. That kind of issue is dangerous because it makes everyone ask whether there are more hidden problems waiting. Was the failed part simply unlucky? Was it stressed by conditions Mercedes underestimated? Was it connected to the way the car was being run? Was it an isolated defect, or a sign that the package was being pushed too close to its limit? The source does not provide those technical answers, so the honest story cannot invent them. But the questions themselves are the pressure. And Wolff has to make a decision while those questions exist. That is leadership in Formula One. You are rarely making decisions with perfect certainty. You are making them with data, instinct, engineering advice, driver feedback, championship context, and the knowledge that every choice has consequences. If Wolff protects the car and Antonelli loses pace, people will say Mercedes became afraid. If Wolff keeps pushing and another failure appears, people will say Mercedes ignored the warning. That is why Silverstone is so dangerous. It gives Mercedes no comfortable option. Only responsibility. And responsibility is exactly what the team must accept now. Because Antonelli did not choose the failure. He did not create the mechanical problem from the cockpit. He did not have the ability to simply drive around it forever. The car became the limitation, and when the car becomes the limitation, the team principal has to own the next step. That does not mean blame is simple. Formula One failures are rarely simple. They involve design, parts, assembly, stress, heat, vibration, software, setup, operating windows, and timing. Sometimes a tiny weakness survives every check until race conditions finally expose it. Sometimes a part looks safe until a specific combination of forces reveals otherwise. But complexity does not remove accountability. It increases it. Because Mercedes now has to understand not just what failed, but why the system allowed it to fail when the stakes were so high. That is what Wolff will be asking. Not only, what broke, but what did we miss? Could we have seen it earlier? Did the data give a warning? Did we push too hard? Did the package carry a hidden vulnerability? Did we leave Antonelli exposed? Those are difficult questions. But championship teams have to ask them before rivals ask louder. Because rivals are already watching. Ferrari watched Antonelli's title blow and saw momentum. Leclerc's boost after Silverstone changes the emotional balance of the fight. Red Bull watched and saw a Mercedes weakness. McLaren watched and saw a possible opening. Every competitor saw a car that did not give its driver a clean race when the pressure mattered. That is enough. They do not need every technical detail. They only need belief. Belief that Mercedes can be hurt. And once rivals believe that, they race differently. They press harder at the start. They stretch strategy longer. They force Mercedes to respond. They make Antonelli work. They make the team choose between pace and protection. They turn every decision into a stress test. That is how one mechanical problem becomes a championship weapon for everyone else. And that is why Wolff has to close the door quickly. He needs to stop rivals believing Mercedes is vulnerable. He needs to stop the garage feeling like it is operating under a cloud. He needs to stop Antonelli carrying Silverstone into the next race. That last part may be the most important. Because Antonelli's trust is now part of the car's performance. If he trusts the Mercedes, he drives like a title contender. He attacks earlier. He commits harder. He focuses on rivals, not symptoms. He listens to the radio without searching for hidden concern in every message. But if he doubts the car, even slightly, the whole system changes. He may still be fast. He may still be brave. He may still look composed. But at this level, the smallest mental distraction can matter. A tiny hesitation. A slightly safer margin. A moment spent wondering whether the car is healthy. That can be enough to lose position, lose strategy, lose rhythm. This is why Wolff's decision is not only technical. It is psychological. He has to decide what Mercedes must do to make Antonelli believe again. Maybe that means changing the way the team runs the car. Maybe it means adding margin in a critical area. Maybe it means replacing components more aggressively. Maybe it means adjusting the risk profile for the next races. Maybe it means prioritizing clean race distance over chasing the final fraction of performance. The source does not confirm the exact decision, so the responsible version cannot claim one specific action as fact. But the pressure behind the decision is obvious. Wolff must protect the title fight without weakening it. That is the paradox. Protect too much, and you stop attacking. Attack too much, and you risk another failure. And the entire Mercedes season may depend on how well he balances those two instincts. Because Silverstone gave Mercedes a warning that points do not only disappear through driver mistakes or rival speed. They can disappear through the car itself. And when the car becomes the threat, the team has to change something. Not necessarily everything, but something. The attitude, the risk level, the preparation, the monitoring, the way they decide when a component is safe enough, the way they listen to the driver when something feels strange. That is where championships are won or lost behind the scenes. Not in the moments fans see, but in the decisions made after the failure. Because the next race is shaped by how honestly the team looks at the last one. If Mercedes treats Silverstone as a freak incident and moves on too quickly, they risk missing the deeper lesson. If they overreact, they risk handing rivals pace. If they respond with precision, they can turn the failure into a stronger system. That is what Wolff has to deliver. Precision. A calm, ruthless, detailed response that tells Antonelli, this happened once, and we know exactly how to stop it happening again. But that message only works if the car backs it up. Because in Formula One, the car always has the final word. A team principal can speak with authority. Engineers can explain the fix. Data can look reassuring. But when the lights go out and Antonelli is fighting for position, none of that matters unless the machine holds together. That is the test. Can the Mercedes survive the pressure? Can it turn performance into points? Can it let Antonelli fight without forcing him to think about reliability? That is what Wolff's decision must achieve. And until it does, Silverstone remains unfinished business. The race may be over, but the consequence is still alive. It lives in the questions. It lives in the rival interest. It lives in the memory of the failure. It lives in the fact that Leclerc gained momentum while Antonelli's Mercedes became the story for the wrong reason. That is a painful combination. Because title fights are often decided by accumulation. A few points here. A missed chance there. A failure at the wrong race. A rival boost at the perfect moment. None of it feels decisive alone, until the season reaches the end and every lost point becomes heavier. Wolff knows that. That is why his decision after Silverstone cannot be emotional. It has to be strategic. He has to look at the championship and decide what Mercedes can risk. He has to look at Antonelli and decide what the driver needs. He has to look at the car and decide whether the pursuit of performance has crossed into danger. He has to look at rivals and understand they will attack any sign of weakness. That is the full picture. Not just a mechanical failure. A title fight calculation. And this is where the story becomes more dramatic. Because sometimes the shocking decision is not a massive visible change. Sometimes it is not a public announcement, or a dramatic reshuffle, or a single radical part. Sometimes the shocking decision is internal. A shift in priority. A quiet decision to protect the car more carefully. A refusal to chase performance at the cost of reliability. A new standard for what risk is acceptable. A message to the garage that Antonelli's championship cannot survive another self-inflicted loss. That may be the real decision Wolff faces. Not whether Mercedes wants to win. Of course it does. But how Mercedes wants to win. By chasing the absolute edge every weekend, even if the car becomes fragile? Or by building the kind of reliability that lets Antonelli turn speed into points again and again? That is the championship question. And Silverstone forced it into the open. Because before the failure, Mercedes could believe it was simply racing rivals. After the failure, Mercedes had to accept it was also racing its own risk. That is a different battle. A more uncomfortable battle. A battle that happens inside the factory, inside the data room, inside the debrief, inside the decisions Wolff has to make before the next race begins. And the answer will not be judged by what Mercedes says. It will be judged by what Antonelli's car does next. If it runs cleanly, trust begins to return. If it fails again, the story explodes. That is the pressure. That is the danger. That is why the next chapter matters. Because Antonelli's title fight does not need more drama from the car. It needs certainty. It needs a Mercedes that can take him to the end of the race. It needs a team principal willing to make the uncomfortable call before another opportunity disappears. That is the first major lesson from Wolff's Silverstone decision. The fastest path is not always the strongest path. Sometimes the strongest decision is the one that protects the fight long enough for the speed to matter.